To make a quick stream or video about the new 2.0 features. It was originally called 1.4, but because this is the first version that officially supports the production hardware, I thought it'd be clear to kind of shift the versioning to 2.0. So if anybody's confused, that is why I was talking about 1.4 in the past, and yeah, it's actually 2.0. So I'm going to go over these features real quick. The changes that this is specifically for just the changes that 2.0 covers. So hopefully you're already familiar with M8 a little bit. The first feature, which I covered before, is the second LFOs. This whole screen right here on the lower right is all new. This is the second set, or second LFO. It also has all of these new commands for it, the same as the original commands, just now they're denoted version 1 or LFO 1 and LFO 2. Yeah, and they could be combined together. They go to the same destination to get kind of more wacky modulation sources as well. Let me, maybe not pitch, huh? Let me set this up real quick. This one, go to mod 1. See here, both of these are set to triangle waveforms, but because they're at slightly different frequencies, you get kind of a different modulation effect because they're both going to the same destination. All right, that's the first feature. Second LFOs. The next feature is the quote-unquote DJ style main filter or mix filter.
Hey, I don't think anyone in the Discord can hear this stream, just so you know.
Okay. One second. Reconnecting. Hello, hello. So I already went over some stuff that's being streamed to my Twitch channel. I don't know why Discord occasionally drops audio from my chat, but hopefully you all can hear me now. Everybody in Discord just missed my small presentation on using 2 LFOs. So tough luck, everyone. You're going to be totally lost with the second LFO. I'm just kidding. I covered it before, and you probably already used it, some of you. The next feature I'm going to go over is the DJ style filter. Which is a low-pass, high-pass filter, and it's found on the mixer screen. I'm going to MIDI map this to my screen by holding Option and dragging my finger. Oh, this is a terrible example, isn't it? Because it doesn't have any high end. Hold on. Let's make this. Let's make this more. There we go. So above 80, it's a high pass, and below 80 center, and below 80, it's a low pass filter. And it works across the whole mix. There's also a command for it if you want to control it from within the sequencer. It's called DJF. The next feature is, yeah, sorry about the Discord. Discord issues, everyone. It was working when I first stepped in here, but I think when everybody joined at the same time, things kind of tripped on itself. Next feature is the tick-based LFO modes. So the LFOs now have their normal frequency rate is in ticks. You see there at the bottom. I change the shape past the last one, which is drunk. It starts doing these T versions at the very end of the name, which stands for tick. So now when I change the frequency, it's in ticks. I covered this in previous Discords, but I'm just going over every feature in this huge release. Yeah, so it's just faster LFO speeds. The next feature here is mixer volumes are now pre as opposed to post, which means pre-effects. So if I turn up, let's say the reverb here, and the chorus even. If I change the mixer value in the mixer screen, it now affects everything. Versus the old versions, it would only affect the main mix for that channel. It was kind of an oversight. Those mixer volumes were kind of added last minute just because initially we just wanted, or at least I just wanted the scopes for all the channels, because personally I like using the volumes in the instrument page itself if I want to change volume. So that way these tracks are more generic placeholders and I could put an instrument on any of them and the instrument's always the same volume versus using this volume, because as soon as I crank this one up, then it's specific to that single channel. Let's see. The rep command repeat now works on sequencer and mixer commands. So rep in the past, this thing here, which repeats the previous command and increments it, you know, a value at whatever value you specify for every tick, it'll just add that value. It only worked previously for the instrument-specific commands that are relative, and now it works for all the commands. So if I want to do a rep with the reverb volume, I could. I can now, I should say. It also works on stuff like tempo, which is pretty funny. So if I set the tempo to like, I don't know, let's see, 80 beats per minute. You see how the tempo on the right side there changes with that rep command. Yeah. Repeat command also now does tick rate parameter updates. And what that means is in previous versions, the repeat command for every tick here, or every step, I should say, it would just increment. Let's say if I set this to 5, it'll add 5 every time a new step hits. Now, instead of doing that, it'll actually ramp to that value, or slew to that value. So in between these two values, actually I can show you if I go really slow here. So tempo 80 is 128, rep is 1. I'm gonna set the temp, whoa, oh, I'll set the tempo really slow. Yeah. Let's set it to like 10. So that way you'll see as soon as this starts playing, the tempo should start changing immediately with that repeat. Let's go up to plus 10. So even before it hits the repeat command, it knows, because there's a repeat command directly after this command, it'll start ramping to this increment value. And it'll keep ramping all the way up versus stepping, which is super great for doing, you know, if you did a assign volume to reverb. Let's set the reverb volume to like 90. I'm going to do a repeat of 10 here. Yeah, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to do this like side chainy kind of thing. Tempo's 120. Yeah. Oh, I can't. Hold on a second. It's funny. I tried turning down the volume and it doesn't work that way anymore. All right. Let's bring this up louder so we can hear it. So yeah, you can see now the repeat command is not only working with the reverb, but it's also incrementing smoothly as it increases in value, which is kind of a big change, especially if we do something like the DJ filter. Set this to, I don't know, 90. Let's just put a hop here for the sake of efficiency. Yeah. That puts new legs on rep. So, let's see here. The retrig command has been reworked. I went over this, I think, in previous meetups, but retrig used to have a lot of repeat values that were literally copies, like repeat 0 in previous versions and repeat 1 were the exact same thing. Or sorry, not repeat, retrig 0 and retrig 1 were the exact same thing. And the same goes across everything that ends, every value that ended with a 0. So if that second number was a 0, it was the same as it being a 1. So I replaced those repeats with a new function. Retrig off, retrig now, retrig once in 2 ticks, in 3 ticks, in 4 ticks. So this kind of acts like almost like a delay command with a retrigger. Let me set up an instrument proper. Get rid of the reverb, pull up the dry. So there's some of these values. I think I went over this in the meetup, but also I'm going to stop saying that now because we know this. But retrig now and stuff like that, these make a lot more sense if you're using them in table, because that's kind of what their intended function is. So if I go into table, throw down a retrig in 6 ticks, which is 1 step. Or there's also a new behavior with retrig. If it's used in table, the table no longer resets, which means we could do some pretty gnarly little mini sequences inside of table for retriggering the instrument without resetting the position. Let me slow down that table tick. This is kind of nutty, but you get the idea. You could do all sorts of weird awesome sequences with this. I'm just doing something weird right now because I'm trying to move along and I can't think straight. But yeah, super useful. That was feature requests by users in our Discord. So thanks for that. Delay. Delay is now independent from every other node event. So there's a delay command here. Let's show the normal use of delay command. So if I want this note here to happen like right in between, right before this note, normally you would do like a delay of 3 ticks, which is a half step. That's kind of the normal use of using the delay. But now, in addition to that, since the range is so wide here, it will hold on to this. So if this delay is longer than, if other notes happen in between this delay will still happen. It'll still trigger this whole row in, say, 5 steps. Let's make that clear by make the pitch really high. So that means you could basically, if you wanted to, if you didn't have enough, if you wanted to put an in-between note somewhere that you didn't have access to before, you can basically hack it in by using the delay command. And it triggers the whole row here. It doesn't just trigger the note. So if you had other effects in here as well, it'll respect all of those things. Before, I think what would happen in previous versions is if you had a large delay, basically all other events would stop playing until that delay is reached. So it was kind of useless for anything other than this, you know, these first 5 tick offsets. Chance command no longer works in table hop. That's kind of a boring feature, but it's useful. So before, when you'd use a chance command inside a table and say you had a hop down here, and over here you had a chance. Let's align these two. Make this high, put a chance. Oh, what did I do here? If you had this set up in previous versions like this, what would end up happening is this chance would happen and it would apply it to this hop down here and kind of misalign these two separate playheads between these two columns. It was basically kind of breaking. But it makes sense why programmatically it was doing that. But it was just kind of like under the hood knowledge, and it basically made this command worthless, I think, in table. So now basically the chance command is it's ignoring these hops, so it'll work as intended. There is now the nth command, which I've shown previously, but I will do that now. No. What should I load? Good old that one. It's gonna be the crappiest drum beat with the worst samples. But there we go. So I'm gonna do an nth here. Oh, I messed that up. So I'm going to put a left on 2, which means, so a lot of these commands, which we've gone over before, but a lot of these commands will say like left and right. You notice on the help at the bottom it says that. Left means, so this number is 2 digits. Here's the right side and the left side. And left means everything over to the left of the command, so it'll affect just this stuff, while this other stuff to the right of the command is respected by the second digit. So if we wanted to leave right normal behavior and only do an nth on this left of the command side, you could do that. The important thing to know with the nth command is its little internal counter, how many cycles have happened on this phrase repeat. It gets reset whenever the chain is reset. So if I had a chain length of 1 phrase here, and the nth is set on to repeat on 2, in this song, the repeat on 2 is never going to happen because the phrase is constantly reset on 1. So that second repeat will never happen. But if I just fill some of these out, I just cloned that last phrase for no reason. There you go. So nth has a lot of different options if you scroll through all of them. The first one just resets it. Resets the little internal counter that it has. The first set of digits does it on 2, so every other measure, every third measure, every fourth, every fifth, every sixth, seventh, eighth, and then at 80, it does a new thing, which is play the first time around and then the third time around, the first time around and the fourth, etc., all the way up to, I think, FF. Doesn't F means only first, so it'll only play once at the very beginning. So if I do that, well, that didn't work at all, did it? Oh. I've only, sorry, I put it on phrase 1 here. Let me put this on this one. Yeah. I'm skipping on to the next command here. Sed, which is a random seed command. So if I put a chance on this note, let's say 50% of the time. So 50% of the time, this note's going to trigger. And it's totally random up until the point where I set a seed. And what the seed will do is once you pick a number, when this seed hits, all of the random events that happen on this entire track will be stuck to that seed. So that way the random event will be always the same. It de-randomizes the randomness, but it's still random in what it does. Yeah, it just repeats the random. So if I find a seed where, there we go. So here's a seed where the chance on the first hit is always off. And now you know that this note's never going to play. Or if I set a seed where it's playing, it'll always play. It's useful if you have like a bunch of random events going on, if you're doing something generative and you want to kind of stick it to whatever it did. You could kind of tune it by using the seed until you find kind of the random stuff that you liked and you know that it's going to repeat again the same way. Okay, I already showed one of these commands, but there's now the VCH, VDE, and VRE, which is the volumes for the 3 main effects in the mixer. That controls these 3 volumes down here, the chorus, delay, and reverb. So it's just commands for those to change them in the song, which I was doing reverb a little while ago with that ducking effect. And then we also have all of the track volumes as commands as well, which controls these mixer screen track volumes. Yeah. Let's see, covered that. Wavsynth new op shapes, which I've covered, of course. Show those now. Let's put turn this down. I'm going to turn off all of my ops so we just have this guy. You can see all the different shapes here. Yeah. So each of the operators can have a different shape and you can make some really wacky sounding stuff with them. There's the Wavsynth phrase set command. So by default, the Wavsynth never resets its phase. And what that kind of means is every note kind of sounds differently each time it hits, which I find it as a feature because it makes it sound a little bit more dynamic. But if you don't want that behavior, if you're doing drums, then you would probably want to throw the FM phase position command in the table so that way it retriggers on every new note. Macrosynth command effects for striking, triggering specific shapes. So the Macrosynth, it's based off of Mutable Instruments braids. The original braids module has basically a trigger input, and now in M8 that's exposed as a command. It works for, let's see what I put it in the thing, I think, too. Which ones it works for? It works for shapes 1C to 23. So it works for plucked, bowed, blown, struck bell, struck drum, kick, snare, etc. And I'll show you what that does. Let me set up an instrument here. Also, why is the volume super quiet? So we're gonna do this new trig command. I'm gonna put it here. I'm gonna set the tick rate to, let's leave it at 1. I'm gonna do the strum effect that other people were trying before these commands existed. I'm gonna do this slow at first too, so we can see what's going on. There we go. So without these triggers, what that would sound like is this. Make that really quick. It's important to mention that you could also do this now using the new behavior of the retrig command, which is kind of funny. So, but it's still there regardless. It also works, you know, if you imagine if you'd use this trig command on a kick drum, it'll do the same thing there, or a snare drum. Any of those instruments that the Macrosynth uses that needs an initial hit, that trig command works on. Let's see. MIDI out instruments now has port selection option. And it's not really that important, but I'll just show it here. So there's this new port selection, which allows you to go MIDI and USB, MIDI or USB. So if you're using both hardware, MIDI, and USB, it allows you to kind of isolate one or the other if you want to. Groove screen help messages. So Groove screen now has a kind of a built-in calculator here that tells you the total in ticks. A normal groove should be 96 ticks. And I could explain that math, but I'm feeling very lazy to explain it. The reason being is because the sequencer's default is 24 ticks per quarter note, and there are 4 quarter notes in a phrase usually. So 24 times 4 is 96 ticks. But anyways, doesn't matter. The important thing here is if you keep that total 96, you know that whatever is using it will be the normal rate. So you can kind of do crazy stuff knowing that this is going to land back on the 1 as long as your eventual ticks will total 96. May I get there eventually? There it is. So this crazy thing, I know that if I run this, it's going to line up with another phrase that doesn't have that crazy groove. Helpful. Let's see. Project Global Transpose now has help message. For those that don't know the hex kind of LCJ stuff, you can see there at the bottom now, it just tells you how many semitones it's offsetting the global transpose. MIDI mapping help messages when assigning and clearing MIDI mappings. So on M8 hardware, if you're using a MIDI input to like a knob controller, etc., normally you hold down the option key and turn the knob on the controller, and it'll just map it. Or you could grab the touchscreen and also drag your finger. And now there's just a little helpful message that says, hey, I grabbed the value. Also, when you clear it, You clear it by hitting delete twice on the parameter is the shortcut. Yeah, so it's just like little help messages to help you. And you can see those mappings in the MIDI mapping screen. The MIDI mappings range changed. It used to be in MIDI. So MIDI, any like controller value in MIDI is, 0 to 127 is the value range. You kind of see this value column here going basically 0 to 7F, which is 127 in hexadecimal. But I upped the range that it's mapped to just because almost all the parameters in M8 are in full 8-bit range from 0 to 255. And doing that math yourself was kind of a pain in the butt. So now, just makes it a little easier. It also means if you have old songs, I can't programmatically adjust your old song because I don't know, what range you kind of set it up to be. So you have to manually adjust it for old songs. Let's see here. Going through my list. Song screen selection mode actions. This is very recent in the betas. I'm going to load up a song here. Of course, it's like hella loud now. Turn this down. So if I wanted to, let's say, previously, let me start there. Previously, when you'd select a range in the song view, you could like edit all these values simultaneously if you wanted to. That, to me, serves no practical purpose except for one use case, and I left that one use case in here. The one use case is if you had these three in this single track, like, playing chain C and you wanted to be chain D or E or F, you could still do that. But if you start selecting multiple ones, it doesn't allow you to do that anymore. What it does do instead is allow you to actually, when you hold down the edit and selection, allows you to shove things around. Which is useful. For me personally, it's useful to isolate a song section I'm working on. If I was just wanting to loop this forever and not worrying about doing a selection loop mode thing, then I could just shove the song screen around. This might change a little bit because there's some undefined behaviors that I'm not totally sold on yet. If you go past like its free area here, it'll start pushing other things around. So it can get pretty messy if you're not careful with it. And the same thing if I did these two and I started pushing them, you can see it collapses them together. I'm not 100% sold on this action yet, but let's see how well it works out for people. I figured it was still better to leave this kind of maybe a little premature feature in rather than not, just because the old actions made no sense to me. So at least now it's like somewhat of a usable feature. Yeah. LFO, you do a new song here. So LFO assigned to pan used to be absolute, which means that, so I have this assigned to pan and it's 100%. What this would do previously is it would modulate the pan from like center to far right. So for you to do kind of a left to right sweep, you would have to like subtract the original pan, and play with this amount versus this amount to get it to do like just a simple left to right kind of panning trick. Now the pan is relative, or not relative, it's bipolar. So what that means is when the amount is full, this pan's going to swing in the entire range of left to right. Yeah, it used to be polar, not, what did I say, absolute? Yeah. It's a typo in my speech. So if you're in Discord right now, you can't hear this. but it's now doing, you can see it in the VU meter, it's panning left to right without me having to mess with this value at all. I can do like a subtle kind of thing as well. So just a usability feature. Don't ask me why it wasn't bipolar to begin with. It should have been. I believe we didn't have pan for the longest time in LFO, and the only time when it was finally available was because I added stereo sample support. I made all the synths have a stereo stream, which allowed me to do pan modulation. And I just kind of chucked it in there, and it unfortunately didn't really think about it at the time. But it makes full sense for this amount value to be bipolar. So if you have an old song, when you load that in, you might have to shift, the pan back to center if you were using it with LFO, and fix these amounts to something that makes sense. Wavsynth. Here's another tricky one. Wavsynth has like two sets of filters. It has like these ones, these normal low pass, high pass, band stop. And then it has a whole second set. The second set used to be what all the other synths are, where how these behave and act. The Wavsynth, how those behaved and act, where it was like down the line, like filter number 4 or filter number 5 on Wavsynth was the same as filter number 1 on Macrosynth. So it was kind of a pain in the butt. So I ended up switching that stuff around, where now Wavsynth's filter is identical to all the other synths that are in M8 until you get up to the past 5 and above 5 are these wave modes. And the difference is the filter, instead of it being post kind of after the waveform is generated, it's kind of written to the waveform. So it's similar to stuff like LSDJ if you're used to do that with the Wavsynth. You can kind of see it here. It has a different sound to it because it's 8-bit and it's limited to the size of the waveform itself. It also has a slightly different cutoff response, and that's because the size kind of changes how many updates that filter gets. So yeah, but you can hear the difference between Wave LP and just regular low pass. Yeah, so I flipped them around. Old songs are automatically fixed and migrated, but it just made sense for usability's sake that since everything has this filter, it should these first digits should be identical across all the synths. The only reason why it wasn't, I think it's because Wavsynth was the first synthesizer that was built into M8, and at the time, I don't even think I had the normal filter that we're used to. So, price of developing on the fly. Cursor. The last feature I should show you is the cursor now exits. If you keep tapping the selection mode, it'll exit selection mode. Before, you couldn't exit selection mode. You'd have to basically copy to exit. And now now you could just keep tapping the select or shift or whatever you want to call it, the select and option key. Yeah. Those are all the updates. That is a lot. And there was also a bunch of bug fixes and some other minor improvements that I'm not going to mention here in the stream because they're not really that important. So if anybody has any questions, you can ask me and I will answer them. Else, let's call it, because I'm tired. But thanks for watching, and I'll be posting this on YouTube for those that missed it. Yeah, I'm gonna go take a nap. No, I'm in the studio now, so I'm gonna try jamming with this thing because I haven't had a chance to do that. Somebody did ask earlier in the beta testing area, since they have a original M8 beta unit, and they were asking if they could downgrade back to version 1.x if they want to, and the answer is yes, of course you can. The only difference is you can't load 2.0 songs in a 1 point whatever firmware. The other thing is to keep note is if you are one of the people that get a production unit, the only firmware that will work is firmware 2.0 and up. So just a little friendly reminder. With that being said, thanks everybody for joining me on this little presentation of 2.0. Hopefully you'll find the new features useful. And everybody enjoy the rest of your weekend. See ya.